Hey everyone, it's Brandy and welcome back to my channel, Brandy Janae's Bookshelf. Today, as you can tell from the title of this video, I will be doing my November wrap up. This one is going to be a little difficult because I didn't do a mid-month wrap-up this for November, and that's mainly because I had started working like the week before I would have done my mid-month wrap-up, and I was just super behind on everything. I think I have like 5 or 6 videos that I currently have filmed that aren't edited yet. I was having issues with computer because was running out of space because I had all this extra footage. It was just a lot going on. I'm gonna try to make this as short and concise as possible. All right, let's just get into it because I'm already rambling and wasting time. So starting off with stats for the month of November. So I read a total of 27 books throughout the entire month for a total page count of 7,496 pages, which I think is kind of wild. And over those 27 books, I had an average rating of 3.15 stars. And I will let you guys know that I did have several rereads, which I'll get to once I continue with my stats. And for the rereads, I didn't count any of those star ratings at all. So that's part of the reason why my average rating for the month is a lot lower than it typically is. So I just realized that I made a mistake. I basically counted all of the books when I was doing my average rating instead of only counting the ones that I actually had ratings for. So instead of the 3.15 rating that I have for the month, it was actually an average rating of 3.82. And then I didn't have any DNFs. I reread a total of 14 books, and then for all of my new reads, 7 of them were print, 5 of them were ebooks, and then 15 of them were audiobooks. And sorry if I'm looking off to the side, my computer is here with all of my stats as usual. Let's get into the actual books that I'm going to be talking about in this wrap up. I will let you guys know that I think I told you guys last month that I tried to make the process super complicated by ranking how much I liked a book that were in the same star section. So I think I had a lot of 3 stars and I was trying to rank them by which ones I liked more. I went back to an old process that I did where if I had anything in the same star rating section, I would just talk about them in the order that I read them, just to simplify the process, and it worked a lot better. Gonna be sticking to that in the future because yeah, that whole process was a nightmare, and then I still got everything wrong. In my final wrap-ups of the month, I do talk about the books in the order of rating, and then like I said, if they fall into the same category, then I go into chronological order. So we're going to be starting off with all of my rereads because I didn't give them new ratings. So the first book that I'm going to be mentioning is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbard. This, I believe, is her first traditionally published novel. This one is following Chloe Brown, who is actually the oldest of 3 sisters, which, if you don't know already, there is a companion series following these sisters, but Chloe suffers from chronic pain as a result of having fibromyalgia. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with that word. Since she started dealing with this chronic pain, she has lived a very sheltered life. And after a near-death experience, she decides that she's gonna make this list to basically get a life. However, time passes after she makes that list, and I think her sisters ask her about it, and she realizes that she hasn't really made any progress on this list. She was able to check off like one thing, and that was it. And she ends up enlisting the help of her superintendent to help her check some things off her list after he helps her out of a tree. Sounds kind of random, but if you read it, it all makes sense. I did really enjoy this romance. It's one I would consider rereading multiple times. I loved it, and I love like the diversity that she includes, and I feel like this is something that I can say across all of her books. Talia Hibbert has a way of including such diversity that I feel like, at least as far as romance, I don't read a lot about. Little things that I didn't really think too much about until, you know, I really sat and thought about the book, and I was just like, wow, you know, she is able to cover such deep topics or important topics while also really having the book focus on being a romance. And I really appreciate that about her and her writing, which I think is why she's one of my favorite authors. So if you haven't checked out Talia Hibbert already and you're into romance, I would say give her a try. I know that she is not going to be an author for everyone, but I do really enjoy her work, and I consider her one of my favorite romance authors. Okay, it's been a little too long on that one. The next book that I have to talk about is another one by Talia Hibbert, and this one is A Girl Like Her. And this is one of her indie published books, and I believe this is actually the first book that I completed by her. And this one is another dual perspective story. I think all of her stories are dual perspective, but this one is following Ruth Kaba, who is the town pariah, and this is a direct result of the town pretty much finding out about her relationship with the town prince, and she's okay with that because she has autism, and she has pretty much grown up not really being able to connect with people or have friends because she doesn't have the best interactions with people because of her autism. However, things start to change for her when a new guy moves into town, Evan Miller. It turns out that he is Ruth's next door neighbor, and one day he brings over food to kind of introduce himself to her and you know, to his neighbor, and they kind of grow a connection from there. Once again, this is another romance. I don't think Talia Hibbert has written anything that's not romance. Another really good one from her. I absolutely love her work. Like I said, I listened to it on audio this time around, and I loved it. The last of the rereads that I'm going to be talking about is books 1 through 11 of the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs. So this one is a paranormal / urban fantasy series that is centered around werewolves. The series is following a woman named Mercy Thompson, and she works as a VW mechanic, and she has her own shop. However, on the other hand, she's also what she calls a walker. We find out a little later in the series that that's not what it's actually called, but they continue to call her, or she continues to call herself this, and pretty much everyone around her calls her that. Anyway, she's a walker, and she's able to shift into a coyote. This is a really long series that is following her. As far as plot for the first book, at least, Mercy is working in her shop, and a werewolf comes into town basically asking her for a job, and because of that, some other things happen which I can't really get into, but like I said, it is a paranormal / urban fantasy book, or series. So if you're into that, I would suggest you checking this one out. Another series that I really enjoyed. Of course, I wouldn't have reread it so many times now if I didn't enjoy it. A few things that I would say, because every time I read it, I notice things that I probably didn't pay as much attention to previously. So one of the major things that I would say going into this, be wary of. So the character, our main character Mercy, is half Native American. However, there are issues with that representation, and just know going into this that the book or the series is written by a white woman. So as much as she can do research, it's not accurate. It is still ongoing, so I have noticed changes since the series has been like the further I get into the series, the more I see changes. But there's some things that, especially as far as Native American representation, that I did not think is done well at all. There were a few other things, but that was the one thing that really stuck out to me. So I did want to mention that in case you're curious about picking up this series. All right, now that I've finished talking about my rereads for November, let's get into all of the new reads, I guess, that I have for the month. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is the only one that got 2 stars from me this month, and I think that honestly I was being kind of generous with the 2 stars, and that was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. So if you don't know what this is, if you've ever heard of Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, if you're on this channel, most likely you know about this, but just in case you don't, this is actually a retelling of the first book in the Twilight series from Edward's perspective. So I'm going to put this down. I'm not going to hold this up this whole time because this book is actually really heavy. I'm not really going to go over the entire plot. You know what, I'll just go over it just in case. Why not be thorough? So the first book, Twilight, is following this girl named Bella, or Isabella Swan, and at the beginning of that story she moves to Forks, Washington to go live with her father after her mother gets remarried, and she feels like she doesn't want to hold her mother back or anything, so she decides to go live with her father. There she meets this Cullen family, which they're really weird. No one really knows why. They kind of stick to themselves, and eventually she starts a friendship, relationship, whatever you want to call it, with Edward, and eventually finds out that him and the rest of his family are vampires, and the series goes from there. Midnight Sun is that retelling of the first book from Edward's perspective. I was just really excited for this book, but as you can tell by the 2 stars that I gave it, not the biggest fan. Honestly, like I said, I was probably being generous with the 2 stars. Okay, so I feel weird saying this, but I almost preferred Bella's train of thoughts compared to Edward's. And I think that's probably because Bella went to sleep. So at least we got breaks in between, you know, the madness. But being a vampire, Edward has a lot of free time. And there was just so much nothing. And I was just like, I don't care. I don't care. I promise I was so close to not finishing this, basically. I was close, but I wanted to finish it because I was like, you spent all of that money on this book. I think it was like 20 bucks from Amazon still. So I was just like, you spent all this money on this book. You were excited. You're going to finish it. I ended up getting the audiobook because I think I tried to read the first chapter and I was just like, yeah, I can tell I'm going to need the audiobook for it. And I have since returned the audiobook because I felt that strongly about it. I very rarely return books to Audible or audio books back to Audible. But this one, I wasn't even done with it. I think I was probably like halfway through and I was just like, yeah, as soon as I'm done, I'm returning this because I'm getting the credit for something else. But it was just really long and monotonous, boring. I was just like, I don't care. I didn't care, basically. So I kind of wish that I would have got this from the library because I could have saved myself some money, obviously, because yeah, I wasn't a fan. I know people talked about how like Edward's train of thought and how with this being published in 2020 some things definitely should have changed, but they didn't. So I wasn't really paying attention to that, honestly. I'm gonna be completely honest. And it's not because I didn't care about that. It was just because I kind of just had it on, and for a lot of the time it was kind of just background noise for me. And I was just like, oh, you're listening to the audiobook, you should actually probably pay attention. So I felt like half the book I don't even know all of the little details because I was off doing something else in my mind. So yeah, moving on to 3 stars. I only had 2 3 stars for the month. The first one being Fables Volume 1. I think it's Legends in Exile, I think it's the subtitle, by Bill Willingham. Like I mentioned, I gave this one 3 stars. This is a comic series that is following fairy tale slash fable characters. They have all basically run from their homelands because there is this creature known as the adversary that has been taking over neighboring worlds. These characters are now living in the human world. This first volume is basically focusing on a murder investigation involving Snow White's sister Rose Red. I think I read this at the wrong time. I'm gonna start by saying that. It's just like I wanted to enjoy it. I enjoy it, but it's just one of those things where I was kind of like, oh yeah, it's good, but you know, once I put it down, I'm kind of like not even really thinking about it, because I started this and then I think like a week passed, like a little over a week passed before I actually picked it up and finished it. And you know, that says a lot. Interesting story. However, either I wasn't ready, you know, it wasn't the right time for me to read this, or I just don't care that much about fairy tales. I'm not gonna give up on this one yet though, because I'm curious to learn more about the characters. I'm hoping that as the series progresses, it does focus on different characters, because there's a lot of characters that are involved in the story. I don't know, I want to get more into the world because I think that this can be really fascinating. I just wasn't immediately drawn in, I guess. And then the other 3-star read that I had was Smoke Bitten by Patricia Briggs, which is actually book 12 in the Mercy Thompson series. And I think this one is also technically a reread, because I think I had listened to the audiobook when it first came out, but I didn't write it down. Like, I didn't put it on Goodreads. I know I read it, but I didn't record it or anything. So I decided to just reread it so that I could, I would count it and didn't feel bad, or like, you know, had fresh enough memory to be able to talk about it. Me talking about this book will contain spoilers for the previous books. So you can look for the timestamp and just skip to 4-star reads. So if you don't want to hear spoilers about the series. So this one, once again, like I said, is following Mercy. At this point, she and Adam are married. Underhill, which you will know who she is, slash where or what it is if you've read previous books in the series. But Underhill opens up a door from her lands to, or in Mercy and Adam's backyard. And when this happens, or because of something that happens when she does this, a fae ends up escaping and basically is going around biting people, and in doing so is able to control them and then eventually kill them. That is the main plot line of this book. However, I think with all of her books in this series, at least, or the majority of them, there are at least 2 other subplots going on. So it's kind of a lot happening. So there's something going on with Adam, and then there's also some wolves in town kind of trying to take over their territory. I gave this one 3 stars because this one was not one of my favorites in the series. I know I have read other books from her, or specifically in the series, but this one just seemed like it had way too much happening. This could have honestly been split into 2 books. Because I think, at least as far as the whole wolves coming into town, that could have been a whole book in its own. It just wasn't hitting all the cylinders for me, and after reading so much of the rest of the series, I was kind of just like, why? For the most part, I enjoyed it, but I didn't appreciate, or I didn't really like the thing that was happening with Adam and how that affected his relationship with Mercy. Like I said, the whole thing with the wolves, I think it was the wrong time. Like, I get why it made it like 2 enemies in one place situation, but I didn't feel like it was the best situation for this specific book. And then the fae, but also dealing with Underhill, because Underhill has her own little plan going on and she's trying to set stuff up for, which I'm guessing is probably going to be plot line for the next book, which is not even coming out for, I think, 2 years, which kind of sucks. But yeah, I enjoyed this one sort of, but for the most part, I was just like, I wish she would have spent a little bit more time working on this. I'm curious what'll be happening next in the series though. All right, moving on into my 4-star reads. So the first of my 4-star reads, which I think was actually my first finished read of November, and that is High Moon by Katie Wilde. This one is a dual perspective following McKenna Lane and Ethan Grimson, and Ethan is actually a werewolf. So McKenna is living in this small town and working on this farm that was left to her by her parents, and she is basically running this farm with her uncle. Ethan actually is coming to town. He was there before, but now he's back trying to find something that might find the next step to figure out who killed his family, which included his parents and his brother. And like I mentioned, he is a werewolf, so he knows that someone specifically were after his parents. He's trying to figure out who it was and why they did it. And get his revenge. Ethan's car breaks down on the side of the road, and McKenna is actually on her way somewhere, and she runs across him and ends up helping him, and he realizes that she is the source of the smell that has been drawing him. He's gonna leave town, and after he finds out what's going on with her at her farm and her being threatened, he actually decides that he's gonna stay to make sure that she's okay. Long story short, they were kind of connected, or something that was going on was kind of connected, as you can expect from this kind of story. Ends up turning into a romance. It was actually pretty good. I picked this one up because I remember Lauren from the Novel Lush, I think she posted it either on Twitter or Goodreads, how she read this, and it was actually really good. So I picked up the audiobook from Hoopla, and I read it in like 2 days. It was really fun. I enjoyed it, and I do want to try more from this author. All right, moving on. Next, I have one of my physical reads. I feel like I didn't really have too many of these this month. Anyway, the next one is 10 Count Volume 1 by Rahito Takarai. So this one is following this guy named Shirotani, who is a germaphobe, and he does have OCD. And he works as a corporate secretary. One day his boss gets into an accident, and through that he ends up meeting this guy named Kurosi. I'm probably saying his name wrong, so I do apologize, but the guy is actually a therapist, and he's just like, you know what, I see that you have OCD. You should probably go seek help with that. After freaking out on Kurosi, Shirotani was just like, oh, well, I never thought about that. Let me go try to seek help. And he ends up finding out that Kurosi is a therapist. Through them meeting again, Kurosi actually agrees or volunteers to help Shirotani with his condition. And through the beginning stages of this process, Shirotani actually starts to develop feelings for Kurosi, which leads into not so good situation. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. But this is actually a book that I do already have a separate first impressions up for, so I will leave that link so you guys can go check that out, just to save me a little bit of time. But I did enjoy this one. Like I said, 4 stars. The next thing I have is another manga, which is Cutie and the Beast Volume 1 by Yuhi Azumi. This is a romance, and it's kind of a taboo romance, but this one is following Momoko and Kuga. Momoko, which is the girl, is 18 years old. However, she is in her 3rd and I believe final year of high school. However, Kuga is 29 and he is a professional wrestler. She actually has a crush on Kuga, the professional wrestler. They have almost, or maybe even, daily interactions over the internet, and that ends up leading to them meeting in person at one of Kuga's events, and eventually to them exchanging phone numbers to be able to communicate more personally. Like I said, this is a taboo romance because it is following a romance between these 2 people that is like an 11-year age gap. And like I mentioned, the girl is still in high school, but she is like legally of age, so it's not as bad as some age gap romances. I thought this was absolutely adorable. I don't think anything is ever going to happen between them until after she graduates high school, but I appreciate the progression of their relationship, because they have to think about how things are going to be seen from the outside. And Kuga does bring it up. He's just like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't really be talking like this because you're still in high school. And I think what I'm really looking forward to in the next volume is seeing how the guy Kuga being introduced to Momoko's family is going to happen, because at the end of this volume, her father or her parents do see them together. So I'm curious to see how all of that will play out in the next volume. So I will be checking that out at some point. But yeah, like I said, 4 stars for this one. Moving on to my next 4-star read, and that was Komi Can't Communicate Volume 1 by Tomohito Odo. And this one is following this guy named Tadano, who is about to start high school. And his one goal for going into high school is to just be average. He doesn't want to stand out. He ends up meeting this girl named Komi, who is deemed the class princess because she is viewed as being very poised, but he quickly realizes that that's not the case, that she actually has a problem with communicating with her peers. And after he finds that out, he kind of tasks himself with helping her make 100 friends. I thought this was so cute. It's very different from any concept of manga that I have ever read before. I'm curious to see how things are going to happen, because the series is centered around Komi, but it is told through the perspective, like I said, of another character, Tadano. And he is a really weird character himself, because he is well-meaning, but the way he goes about things is not always the best. I think it's hilarious. I'm looking forward to checking out more from that. The next couple things that I will be talking about together, and that is the entire Binti trilogy by Nnedi Okorafor, which includes Binti, Binti Home, and Binti the Night Masquerade. This one is following, as you can probably guess, a girl named Binti, and she is one of the Himba people. She actually receives the opportunity to travel to attend the school called Umza University on a completely different planet. However, once she's on the ship and making her way, the ship actually gets hijacked, and she has to figure out how to survive to make it to the planet, to the school, so that, you know, the people there can actually help her. Another series that I really enjoyed, I actually do have a separate series review for all 3 of these, so I will link that up above so you guys can check that out, so that I don't have to spend more time talking about this now. But yes, just know that I absolutely love this so much that I have been thinking about this even more, and I'm thinking about bumping my rating up from 4 stars to 5, because I've just been thinking about these since I finished them, which is crazy to me because I feel like I rarely do that. The next one that I have is Black Market issue number 1 by Frank J. Barbary. This one is a series that is following this guy named Ray Willis, who is a disgraced medical examiner, and now to make a living he is working in a funeral parlor. And one day his brother returns from jail saying that he has gotten his act together, and he basically tells his brother that he has found this new job for him, this new completely legal job, I should say, that's going to make him all of this money. And he considers it because his wife has been diagnosed with MS, and in order to be able to provide her with her medicine, he's just like, you know, I need to do this. However, when Ray starts to perform the job, things are looking a little shady. So this one was really interesting. They're pretty much trying to capture superheroes to harness their powers, to try to use them for one reason or another. Part of the reason why I didn't give it a higher rating is mostly because there was a lot of back and forth, way more than I would expect in one issue of a comic, because we start off at one point and then we jump forward and then it's like a flashback, and it's all on like 23 pages, so it's kind of a lot going on. But I'm fascinated by the story and I do want to read more. So next I have Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. And if you remember, I talked about the first book in this companion series at the beginning of this video. This is the second book that is following the middle sister, Danica Brown, and also Zafir Ansari, who is an ex-rugby player who is now working as a security guard in a university building. And I didn't mention this, but Danica, or Danny as she goes by, is a PhD student, but she's also teaching in the process of that. The two of them know each other and they have interacted with each other before the start of this book, but the story really takes off after Zephyr, or Zaf as he goes by like half the time during the book, saves Danny after she's stuck in the elevator doing a drill that they're having in the building. Pretty much from there they go viral, and Danny is not too upset about it or anything, but Zaf is just like not really wanting to be in the public eye. But then eventually he decides to ask Danny if she will fake date him in order to be able to promote his like non-profit sports organization, and also offers therapy. And Danny agrees, so that starts their fake relationship. So I gave this one 4 stars, and that's another one that I was considering bumping up, because this is another book that I have just been thinking about constantly since I finished it, because this book just provides so much. It's just crazy to me because although the main focus is romance, there's just a lot that is also looked at. They're mentioning and dealing with anxiety and depression, also trauma that is not viewed as being trauma, but internalizing the actions of others and making that into a new lifestyle. Like I said, I am thinking about bumping this up because I think this is one of my favorite romances for the year. So love this. Gave it 4 stars, possibly 5 stars. So once I do my end of the year videos, if you see this and I mention it's a 5-star, don't be shocked. Second to last book that I'm going to be talking about in this wrap up is Assassination Classroom Volume 1 by Yusei Matsui. And I gave this one 4.5 stars. I know it was teetering on the edge. I wanted to give it 5 stars, but I was just like, is it worth 5 stars? I might bump this up too at some point, because it's another one I was just like, I need more. I love it. This was like the weirdest manga that I have ever read. So there's this creature that destroys 70% of the Earth's moon. And he basically, I don't know if it's a he or it, but basically it threatens to destroy the Earth in a year's time. But in the meantime, the thing wants to teach this specific class, or I don't know if it was a specific class or just wanted to teach. And at this school, I don't even remember what the school is called, but there is this class, the 3E class. And they have been putting this class for one reason or another. Usually it has to do with their bad grades and not being able to keep up with the regular students. So basically class 3E, they're isolated from the rest of the school. They're treated badly by the other students and the teacher, and there are all these things that are set up against them. This creature that basically threatened Earth ended up becoming their teacher, and the government comes in and it's just like, well, we're giving you guys this opportunity. If you kill this thing, I don't remember the exact amount, but they get a lot of money if they manage to kill this thing off. However, he is really fast. They said he could fly at like Mach 20. I honestly don't know logistics of that, but like he can stop missiles. He was just like, they sent fighter jets after him or something, and he was cleaning it midair for them or something like that. So basically this creature doesn't think anyone can destroy it or kill it or whatever. So he's there to teach these kids until the time comes where he's ready to destroy the world. And that's pretty much the whole purpose of this first volume. So like I said, this is the weirdest and most interesting manga that I have ever read, because while this creature is being so destructive, it looks like it's also trying to be helpful. I'm gonna say he because I think they're referring to the creature as he throughout the book. He's there and he's actually teaching these kids and helping them improve, although he keeps saying like, you know, at the end of this time it's not really gonna matter, but since I'm here, you're gonna learn. It's funny, it's weird, I enjoy it, and I want to read more. Sadly, the library that I use doesn't have the digital copies available to check out, so at some point I will be looking into purchasing copies of this because I know that I'll enjoy it, and I have a feeling that it's going to take a weird turn. And I have a feeling also that there's more going on to the story as to why this creature decides he wanted to destroy the moon and destroy the earth. I just want to read it. It was interesting and I want more. And then the final book that I have to talk about in this video is Something is Killing the Children, Volume 1 by James Tinian IV, which I gave 5 stars. This is taking place in this town called Archer's Peak, and children have been going missing. And then something tragic happens during a sleepover with these boys. One of the boys ends up surviving, but they think that he might have had something to do, or the town people think that he might have had something to do with the other boys dying like really horrifically. The adults in the town, they don't know what's going on, who's taking the children, like what's happening to these kids. All hope seems lost, but then this mysterious woman comes into town to take care of the monster. This was wild. So I knew that it was like along horror lines, but I honestly didn't know really what to expect going into it. I think I heard Ashley, once again from the Book is My Realm, mention this maybe in a live show or something. I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna go check that out. And I read it and I was just like, what is going on? I think in the first chapter, like first couple pages, it was just madness. The way volume 1 ended, yeah, things are not looking good for this town. I'm curious about that. Like I said, I gave this one 5 stars, loved it, want more. So those are all the 27 books that I had to talk about in this reading wrap up. I'm sorry that I did rush through some of the books. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more from me, make sure you subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye.